What if everything you think you know about what happened after Jesus died is only the surface? What if, during the 3 days, his body lay still? His spirit was not silent, but shaking the unseen world to its core? Because while the earth mourned, hell trembled, chains broke, gates shattered, and every dark power that thought it had won realized too late that it had stepped into its own defeat. What really happened in those 3 days? Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear may change the way you understand spiritual warfare forever. They thought the story ended at the cross. The religious leaders thought they silenced him. Rome thought they controlled the outcome. Hell thought it had finally destroyed the light. But the moment Jesus breathed his last breath, the spiritual world shifted. Something ancient, something prophesied, something unstoppable was triggered. For 3 days, unseen by human eyes, Jesus walked into the deepest chambers of Hades, not as a victim, not as a prisoner, but as a king invading enemy territory. And the darkness had no power to stop him. Today, you're going to see exactly what he did step by step. From the moment his spirit left his body to the moment he rose in unstoppable glory. When Jesus died, the earth shook, but the underworld screamed, because the darkness suddenly felt something it had never felt before. A presence descending, but not in defeat, in authority. In the realm of spirits, every fallen being recognized him instantly, not as a crucified man, but as the Son of God, radiating a holy fire that no demon could endure. Hell expected to celebrate. Instead, it braced for war. Scripture says, "He descended into the lower parts of the earth." F 4-9. He didn't wander. He didn't search. He walked with purpose, straight into the depths where souls had waited since the beginning. He arrived not as a whisper, but as a thunderbolt. The spiritual prison shook as the light stepped into the land of shadows. Chains melted, walls cracked, and the atmosphere changed because true authority had entered the room. 1 Peter 3:19 says Jesus preached to the spirits in prison. But this was not preaching to convert. It was preaching to announce victory. He declared, "It is finished." Death has lost its power. The sacrifice is complete. The curse is broken. The way back to the Father is open. Asterisk. Every fallen spirit, every dark ruler, every ancient enemy heard the announcement. This was not a message. This was a sentence. In another chamber of the underworld were the righteous, Abraham, Moses, David, the prophets, waiting for the Redeemer promised for generations. And suddenly, they saw him, not in a vision, not in a prophecy, but standing before them in glory. Imagine the explosion of hope. Imagine the tears of recognition. Imagine thousands of souls lifting their heads for the first time in centuries as the Messiah walked into their darkness. This was the moment they had lived, died, and hoped for. Every soul who had trusted God before the cross lived in expectation, but they could not enter heaven yet. The price had not been paid. But now the Lamb had been slain. The blood had been poured, and the doors could finally open. Jesus reached out his hand, and chains that existed for millennia shattered like dust. Souls who had waited in silence felt power surge through them. Every promise God ever made, from Eden to the prophets, was being fulfilled before their eyes. This was the greatest jailbreak in the history of existence. And Jesus was leading the Exodus. But the story was only beginning. Now came the moment hell never expected. Jesus stood at the gates guarded by ancient forces, the ones who believed death was their territory. But death no longer belonged to them. The king had arrived to reclaim his keys. Every dark principality gathered, believing they could intimidate him. But one step from Jesus, and their power dissolved like smoke. His authority crushed every lie, every accusation, every stronghold. And then he walked forward, fearless, unchallenged, unstoppable. The gates of Hades did not open politely. They were torn from their hinges. Revelation 1:18 records his victory. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. This was not symbolic. This was literal spiritual authority. Jesus seized the keys, the symbols of power, control, and dominion, right out of the hands of the enemy. In that instant, death lost ownership. Hell lost access. Darkness lost the right to hold a single soul that belongs to God. This was the moment hell realized it could never win. Imagine a flood of light ripping through the underworld as Jesus began leading the righteous out. Abraham walked behind him. Moses followed. David sang. Prophets rejoiced. It was the greatest procession the spiritual world had ever seen. A prison that once held millions became empty. A silence filled hell, not the silence of peace, but of absolute, suffocating defeat. The enemy watched everything he ever controlled slip through his fingers. While earth saw stillness, hell experienced chaos. Demons scattered, guardians fled, dark corridors collapsed. Ancient chains broke apart because the one they tried to destroy was destroying them. Every prophecy the enemy tried to stop was being fulfilled in front of him. This wasn't just defeat. This was humiliation. A reversal of every plan darkness had ever made against humanity. Jesus wasn't escaping hell. He was emptying it of its stolen authority. And then came the third day. Before the stone rolled away, before the women arrived at the tomb, before the guards saw the impossible, a pulse of divine power surged through the universe. The same Jesus who shattered Hades now stepped back into his body, not weak, not wounded, but glorified. Light filled the tomb. Death reversed. The heart that had stopped began to beat again. The King who descended now rose in unstoppable glory. Hell was defeated. Death was dethroned. And resurrection became the eternal proof that darkness cannot win. Before we continue, what do you think Jesus' most powerful act during those 3 days was? Comment below. I want to read your insight. Your comment might help someone else understand this story in a whole new way. Those 3 days were not silence. They were victory. They were the invasion of the light into the deepest darkness. And because of what Jesus did in those 3 days, death no longer has the final word. Hell no longer has the keys. Darkness no longer has the power. The King who descended is the King who reigns forever. And his victory is yours.